have made it to the end of an era. Game of Thrones has officially ended. It is all over, but was it good? Or was it a little bad? We could have used some work. I don't know. We're going to discuss it in this episode. We are talking about the episodes of Game of Thrones as they've been airing in this final season. I am joined here again with my friends Jake and Aaron. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm Aaron.
That was anticlimactic. And I mean your guys' introductions. I don't mean this episode of Game of Thrones.
We're foreshadowing.
Yeah. We're foreshadowing already to what this episode's going to be about. If you haven't picked up the hint yet, I don't think we like this episode very much.
I thought it was a masterpiece.
Did you really? Well, then go ahead and start off with your thoughts.
Yeah, it was a masterpiece in forgetting how to write and make a worse season finale than Dexter.
Damn. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah.
I would say it's worse than Dexter's. Definitely.
Damn.
That could be some sort of debate. Because, I mean, I think we all agree it was bad. But agreement isn't as interesting.
Worse than Dexter.
We could postpone that till, like, maybe a little later if we want.
Well, if you guys think it's worse than Dexter, that's one thing. But do you guys think it was worse than the ending of Breaking Bad?
Yes.
I still thought we were going to review Ozymandias this week.
We should. We should just review that instead. The best part is, and Jake, I read this to you about the quote from D&D regarding going into this series finale and what they were hoping for. I have to pull it up again, the exact quote.
I'll fill everyone in right now. For those listening, I'm sure everyone has probably heard or knows by now, seeing as we are recording on, hasn't been a week, it's a Friday after Game of Thrones. It feels like it's been forever. The season finale was massively disappointing, and it might be it's the worst episode in the series, I would say, by far. Not a lot happens. I think majority of the episode is walking. I wanted to say I saw someone posted a video where they cut out all the dialogue and the episode was still 45 minutes long. Kind of a complete waste of time, and it really brings down Game of Thrones as an entire series, and it makes the final season even worse. There was kind of a special case this season where every episode, starting at the third episode, would make the last episodes worse due to that nothing being resolved or poor decisions. It seemed like this whole season had a ripple effect where every episode just made everything so much worse.
Yeah, but you're just saying this because the character of Dany didn't go your way.
Right. That's the only reason I am unhappy.
Yeah, you guys are just unhappy with this episode because you expected Dany to be a good guy and she turned out to be a bad guy. That's the only reason why people are complaining.
I have 400 posters of her up in my bedroom. I have a Targaryen tattoo. Like, how could they betray me like this? It's just so bad. I
got DA on one butt cheek and NY on the other butt cheek. And a picture of Dany's face right in the center. I'm a giant-ass fan. But I found that quote.
Biggest of a fan. I named my kid Khaleesi. That's not even Daenerys' name. It's a title.
So we're going to get into some of those because there's a lot of that I find very funny about this episode. But according to showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Wise, approaching the writing of the final episode, it was extremely important for them that the majority of people would like the conclusion of the story. Even though they knew that the large fan base of the show, they would unavoidably disappoint some. They stated several times that they took the finale of Breaking Bad as inspiration, jokingly stating that the worst argument that they could have, it's worded weird, have been said about it was, is it an A or an A plus ending? I don't think these guys realized the backlash they were about to ensue. And I just want to start off with the reasoning behind why we didn't like this. And it's not because of the story in particular. I mean, there's specifics in the story, like Bran becoming king, which in the regards of how they've set Bran up, I don't understand how he just became king, and places like Dorne and the Iron Islands were just like, yeah, we'll give up fighting for the throne, which we've been fighting for generations and generations, because this kid has a cool story. But the reason why most people are angry about this show or disappointed or whatever it may be is not the story, it's not the characters, it's the fact that none of it made any goddamn sense in the context of what was going on. Nothing felt earned. There's supposed to be a giant love story going on that comes to a peak where one of them has to kill the other one, but nobody believed from the start that these two were in love with each other, nor that they even seemed to like each other as actors, because there's almost no connection between them. And all we get in the end is just a very anticlimactic scene with no emotion whatsoever, and then 50 minutes of dialogue that is just horribly written. Like you're saying, it's just a bunch of walking. Somehow there's still a fucking Night's Watch. I don't know. Let's I guess let's delve into it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just giving a quick synopsis of everything that happens, because boy howdy, if we just spend our time on plot holes, we won't even summarize what happens.
Yeah.
So the episode opens up right after Drogon has absolutely burned down all of King's Landing. It takes perspective from Tyrion. He's walking around witnessing all the destruction. He walks for, I believe it's like 9 minutes, and he's making his way to the Red Keep. He goes underneath the Red Keep, and he finds like all this rubble, and he climbs through a hole. And when he climbs through the hole, he is in a clear area where Jaime and Cersei were. So there was when Jaime and Cersei, when we last left them, they had all the rubble of the King's Land, or the Red Keep, falling on top of them. Tyrion climbs through a hole into the area where they're at, and no rubble fell on, or Cersei, he finds Jaime's golden hand, and he sees Jaime and Cersei, both their dead bodies holding each other, and their dead bodies are like, they're not smashed or cut, they're just kind of laying there dead. It's not like they just had tons of bricks fall on them. But Tyrion is standing in a spot like 2 feet away where no debris fell. And it really undercuts the scene, because you're like, didn't the whole building collapse on them? But
that's what we pointed out last time, because then they always have that weird cop-out thing where it's like, oh, they actually lived.
Right.
And if somebody mentioned if they were just wearing helmets or hard hats, they probably would have lived.
Right, why didn't they just grab their hard hats? Anyways, then I believe next Jon is making his way to Daenerys, and along the way he runs into Grey Worm, who is executing Lannister soldiers who for no reason don't need to be executed. And he said Daenerys gave him the order, but Daenerys just landed and has not even seen Grey Worm yet, in which Jon and Grey Worm get really tense, and Grey Worm and his men point their spears at Jon. You think they might fight right there, but then Jon continues to make his way to Daenerys, and then gets to Daenerys, who's giving like a giant speech on the steps of the Red Keep. Grey Worm somehow beat Jon there. Even though he was spending his time stabbing people, he beats Jon to Daenerys. Daenerys gives a speech to her Dothraki and Unsullied, of which have the largest army they've ever been in a long time. They respawn during the battle. You have the most Unsullied on screen and the most Dothraki on screen since seasons ago. They're all just alive. She gives a very just like fascist dictator speech, almost like verbatim based off of Hitler. It's so on the nose it hurts. Tyrion goes up to her and gets rid of his, he basically tells her, like, hey, fuck this, I'm not going to be part of this. He takes his hand of the kingpin, throws it away, and then Dany basically says, well, I'm going to have you arrested. And then Jon goes and sees Drogon just covered in ash or snow. They don't clarify which. And we get to our ultimate scene. It's like 30 minutes into the episode. I've pretty much summed up everything that has happened, and almost nothing of substance has happened.
Oh no, you're missing one
You're
thing.
right.
You're missing Jon's ultimate decision of whether or not he should let Dany live or die. Like it's any question at this point what he should do. If they're trying to set up this whole moral dilemma, which just completely falls flat.
Oh my god.
They're trying to make it like, oh, should I do it? I know deep down I should, but I still love her. And let's talk about the love story real quick.
Oh,
Because Jake mentioned it in an earlier episode, and he basically was saying that the only dialogue we really get between them that's like flirtatious or anything is when they're discussing battle plans. Which, I don't know about you guys, when you're talking to a girl at a bar, you just talk about military strategy, it works every time. And after that, they sleep together, and then the next scene we get, Dany's telling Jon to let's ride a dragon together. And then after that is when their relationship starts to crumble and fall apart. Because that's when Jon tells Dany the truth and whatnot. So they talk about some military strategy. They fall in love. They have sex. They ride dragons. And that's all we get. So now we're supposed to believe now that Jon is madly in love with her. Because they told us this. They never showed it to us. They told us that they're madly in love. And that he has to come to this big decision on whether or not to kill her. And then he approaches her in the throne room, which I think, Jake, you wrote down what they were saying about her tirade about going crazy and saving the realm and whatnot.
Yeah, so before that, though, I want to mention the one thing I forgot. I forgot that Tyrion and Jon, somewhere in there, they have their conversation where Tyrion basically tries to tell Jon, oh, you need to kill her. And Jon's pretty much like, but my queen, I can't kill my queen. Anyways, I wrote down their conversation. Jon, we're starting from Jon's perspective. He says, forgive him, referring to Tyrion. Daenerys says, I can't. Jon goes, you can. You can forgive all of them. Make them see they made a mistake. Make them understand. Please, Dany. Dany, we can't hide behind small mercies. The world we need won't be built by men loyal to the world we have. Jon, the world we need is a world of mercy. It has to be. Dany, and it will be. It's not easy to see something that has never been before. The good world. Jon, how do you know? How do you know it will be good? Dany, because I know what is good, and so do you. Jon, no I don't. Dany, you do. You've always known. Jon, what about everyone else? All the other people who think the nobles are good. Dany, they don't get to choose. Be with me. Build the new world with me. This is our reason. It has been since the beginning. Since you were a little boy with a bastard's name, and I was a little girl who couldn't count to 20. We do it together. Break the wheel together. John, you are my queen. And, oh, you are my queen, now and always. And then he stabs her. I hate this. I hate everything about this.
So, going back on the relationships, because that doesn't sound like two lovers put to like a decision or a quarrel or a point when he's about to stab her and it means something to him. So let's remember the scene at the Red Wedding, which D&D decided to add, which I think was a brilliant thing to add. It was not in the books, because this character is actually still alive in the books. So when Rob is talking to Jane, her name is Jane, right?
Yeah, Jeyne.
Yeah, Jane Poole. When he's talking to her, they're like, she gets ready to kind of like fake slap him. He grabs her hand, and there's a little bit of a teasing moment, and then she alludes to her stomach and basically lets him know, I'm pregnant, without saying the words, I'm pregnant. To which Rob responds, boy or girl, and she just kind of smiles and says, I don't know. And then moments later, she gets stabbed immediately in the stomach, which is the initial heart wrench of the Red Wedding, is Rob watching.
Want to know what was crazy about that?
What's that?
When I watched that episode, I registered that she was pregnant, but then it took like weeks later. I had a nightmare of that, and then I woke up and I realized like, oh wait, like, and then I like put the whole thing together. Like, oh wait, they both died.
Yeah, no, and that doesn't happen in the books, because in the books there's like a rumor that she's pregnant and that the baby might become like King of the North or some shit like that. But, you know, that scene is very simple the way they did it. Like, there was some teasing going on between the characters, which showed more of a, I guess the best words to say is like a normal connection, because that's what normal people do to each other, is they kind of tease each other and play around, and it's flirtatious. And then she goes to kind of slap him, like I was saying, and then it's like we find out she's pregnant. You get that nice heart-to-heart moment, and everything feels very real in that scene. And then we also have like Jon Snow and Ygritte, where Ygritte's kind of, you know, messing with Jon and trying to get him to show more emotion than his stoic, oh, I believe in the watch. So she does the same thing, where it's kind of like teasing and very flirtatious. She's trying to, like, oh, maybe we should sleep together for warmth and stuff like that. Like, kind of fucking with him a little bit. But it creates this, like, tension between the two.
Chemistry.
And, yeah, there's a chemistry to it, and there's a tension to it. And when they eventually do hook up and he's got to kill her or fight her in battle, and then she gets shot in front of him, you believe that he really cared about this character, and that it's a big moment to see her die in front of him, even though, because he has to make that decision between the watch and his own emotions. Now we get a character talking about battle strategies and whatnot, and they kind of just talk a little bit and, you know, eventually hook up, and then they ride dragons together, and, you know, it makes Danny laugh because he almost falls off the dragon, and then they kiss, and
they kill each other.
And then they kill each other. It's like, and we're supposed to have this same emotional reaction, but we're not getting any of that chemistry. We're not getting anything more than two characters discussing kind of just stupid shit. It's like we keep joking about it, but it is like the love story in Star Wars, where Anakin and Padme are falling in love, but there's nothing in any of what they're saying that feels like two people falling in love. It feels more like, hey, these characters are supposed to fall in love, so let's say I'm falling in love. Like,
Right.
it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel real, and it's
I
supposed
think
to be the biggest tension of this entire season.
I think it really is almost like a detriment having this love story introduced, because John and Egret built a relationship over 2 full seasons, and then this had no time to build. The Dragon and the Wolf was the season finale of season 7, where they plowed just because they talked military strategy. Like, all scenes prior to that, they never really did anything that would lead you to believe that they were flirtatious of any kind. And then the first 2 episodes of this season are battle preparations, and they mainly focus on John telling her, Danny that is, his lineage, there's a battle. And then the next episode, episode 4, Danny and John barely have any interactions from here on out. Nothing that he doesn't say much other than my queen.
My queen.
And I wanted to add to the Egret thing is, in the Watchers on the Wall episode, when she's got John dead to rights, I think one of my favorite things about it, the way it's shot, is I think he let her kill him, even though he has to put, like you said, his duty or his love first. And in that moment, I think seeing their relationship blossom to where it was, I think he truly would let her shoot him down. I really do. And I always loved that their relationship had so many ups and downs, and he had to betray her and be like, you always knew I was a crow. And he let her, he runs away from her, but she shoots and puts multiple arrows through him, and it's like, talk about a fucking complicated relationship. Such a good one, to the point where Kit Harington and Rose are married, and Rose is the actor who played Egret.
Yeah.
They're married outside of the show. And then you get this fucking wet blanket, this awful conversation of Danny. It makes no sense that Danny's trying to tell John that he knows what good is. It's like, duh, but John has lost his brain and lost all dialogue options this season.
And
he can't even tell what's good anymore, even though his character was one of the most honor-bound, altruistic characters in the entire series. And she's telling him that, you know, hey, if you want this world to be good, obviously she doesn't realize that the conversation she's given is the last motivation for John to kill her. But yeah, it's just frustrating to see John have his character assassinated just so that all of this can play out, because there's no way the John from season 4 or any earlier season would allow Danny to go this far.
Yeah. When I'm wondering how much of this is between the actors and maybe them not having a real connection between each other, because they never really did any Q&As with each other afterwards, and never really did much, it seems like, outside of the show, where they talk about the scenes they did with each other and whatnot. And I'm wondering, because they were able to still set up a believable, even though albeit almost unnecessary, love story between Grey Worm and Missandei. Or I wouldn't even say unnecessary, because in the end, at least that got paid off. But it seemed kind of unnecessary when they were initially doing it in like season 6 and 7. And they were able to make that believable. They were able to make the things between Brienne and Jaime that they forced this season believable. Because, you know, those characters, especially for Brienne, like, you really believe that, you know, she felt something for Jaime after everything they've been through, and seeing who Jaime really was when he opened up to her and lost his hand and became a completely new, less arrogant person. And then
Until
even
the final season, until he just hit it and quit it.
yeah,
We
which
forgot
was just
Don't forget that.
which was we'll get to that because of your brother's joke. But and then even just recently, like they just threw it on us with Arya and Gendry. At least like that scene, it felt somewhat believable that these characters were having this moment together. But it just doesn't feel believable whatsoever between Jon Snow and Daenerys. And I don't know if that's because of the writing. Well, of course, it's partially because of the writing, or if it's because maybe these actors really didn't have much of a connection, and they just kind of had to work together and force it. I don't know. It's just it wasn't there.
It's still the writing. In my opinion, the writing at least 95%. Like, sure, the actors' chemistry has a lot to do with it, like is important. But they're both really good actors, and if they were giving something to talk about other than military plans, we would have bought into their relationship a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like,
because yeah,
I don't know.
the only real moment we get is them riding giant CGI dragons, and Dany finds it funny. Like that's the moment in this season that's supposed to make us believe that they're in love with each other. Because that's the whole purpose of that scene, looking back on it, is just to show, hey, they love each other. But it doesn't come off that way at all. That's just my big gripe with all this. But now that the story's over, let's move on to everything else. We got.
Don't forget about the throne.
Oh my, yeah, that's right. And then.
Sorry, you're already trying to wipe out the bad. Pretty much, people. What we've gotten to is, I guess, what you could call the okay. The only okay portion of the episode is pretty much what we've just discussed.
Did you talk about Ghost yet?
No, not yet.
Oh, no. We've talked about everything leading up to Daenerys, and that was it. We haven't even mentioned our boy Drogon.
Yeah.
Okay,
you know, the sentient dragon that understands politics and what the symbolism of the Iron Throne means. That Drogon. Because somehow a dragon is so intelligent that it knows that this throne is the reason why Dany has gone crazy and mad with power. So, in a fit of rage, the dragon decides to melt it.
Don't forget to mention the fake out of where Drogon looks like he's going to kill Jon. This takes place right after Jon stabs Dany in the stomach. Not
in
really
the heart.
Oh, it wasn't the heart?
The way she died immediately, it makes me think it was the heart.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I almost want to look it up because I thought he stabbed her on the left side. But even then, Jon stabs her, and there's no more dialogue. The last thing Jon says to her is, "You're my queen, now and always."
That was a good impression.
I mean, he's only said it all season, and I've had plenty of time to practice it. Yes, Drogon comes in, sees a dead Dany, looks at Jon, starts to get ready to breathe fire, and then fakes the audience out and burns the Iron Throne.
We can all sigh of relief.
He knows that this would mean the end of the feudal system. In which case, he burns it like a badass and then picks up his dead mother's body and flies away forever, never to
And
be
says,
heard from again.
"This is gonna make a good ass snack." Yeah, because
You're
there's
just gonna let that go to waste.
there's no moment where the dragons seem very sentient that they've set up in the past. I mean, obviously there's a connection with Dany that she has, but they've shown scenes in the past when the dragons even like lash out and hiss at Dany if they're eating and stuff like that. Like they've always been portrayed as wild animals. They're smart and they're guardians, and they are very connected to her and her thought process. But I don't understand why a dragon would be smart enough to understand the symbolism of burning down a throne. Like, that part to me is just kind of weird. And it's like,
It was awful.
You
Well,
could
my biggest
argue.
problem is they should have had him burning everything in a fury. Part of the things that got burned was the throne, instead of him burning the throne for 10 minutes, just
the
aiming
throne.
it at the throne.
Yeah, because that was long. That was like a good 15, 20 seconds of just him going, rock!
And we mentioned that Dustin and I viewed the spoilers ahead of the episode.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so I read all the plot points and I was like, well, that kind of sounds pretty bland, but like, I could definitely see them like doing that at least sort of gracefully, and they didn't at all. It was just like so bland and so cheesy in like just, oh man, couldn't have expected anything else.
Well, I just don't understand how the dragons just all of a sudden become. He understands metaphors, and he understands symbolism, because that's the only purpose of that scene is, oh, isn't it cool that the dragon burned down the throne and everything they've been fighting over, it's just like melted down, and Dany was this close but never even got to sit on it. The dragon understood, but because the person who put the throne into place was the first Targaryen conqueror. And I guess it takes another Targaryen conqueror to melt down the throne, but it was the dragon. It wasn't the Targaryen telling the dragon. It was just the dragon decided to do it, and it made no fucking sense.
Well, my favorite explanation from fans is that Drogon didn't know that Daenerys didn't sit on the throne. He thought Daenerys sat on the sword throne and then got a sword poked into her, and he realized this. He saw Jon holding her, and he was like, she sat on those swords? Fuck! That's the only other thing I could think of.
That's fucking stupid.
Sit on a bunch of swords?
So either the dragon's super intelligent and can understand metaphors and symbolisms and whatnot, or the dragon's really stupid and doesn't see a knife in Jon Snow's hand and doesn't put two and two together.
He thought the throne made of swords stabbed her. I can buy that.
Yeah, it stabbed her in the front because Dany decided to lay on it instead of sit.
She jumped on it. She tried to ride it like Drogon. Drogon doesn't understand that. He goes, she always jumps on me.
Is this what I do with thrones? Oh, I stabbed myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the credits roll and the episode was over.
No, actually, we still have 50 minutes to go. Because after this, we get a non-disclosed time jump, and we only know it's a time jump because Jon Snow has more facial hair, and it looks like he hasn't shaved in a couple days. And then we get the whole scene where they get all the leaders of the 7 remaining kingdoms, and they decide to pick a ruler. And they pick Bran the Broken, whose dick don't work, to rule the kingdoms. How do we know his dick doesn't work? Because Sansa pointed it out. How does she know his dick doesn't work? I don't fucking know. Because there's a lot of people who are in wheelchairs whose dicks still work.
Even Hawkins still got boners, so I find it hard not to believe Bran can.
You know what Bran finds hard to believe? Nothing, because he still gets hard. How the fuck does Sansa know he doesn't?
Yeah, everybody, Bran's king. Fuck spoilers, who cares?
Oh, I always say spoilers before this starts.
How do we even get there? Jon is a prisoner, Tyrion's a prisoner. They're prisoner of Grey Worm and the Dothraki, who should be viewed as the enemy now, yet no one says anything? Did they not just know that there was a massive attack on King's Landing and everything was scorched? That's pretty hard to cover up, you know? How did King's Landing get destroyed? Well, that queen we all supported kind of just burned the whole city down. Anyways, Grey Worm and the Dothraki have Tyrion and Jon prisoner. Everyone's just kind of cool with that, and they're all giving some authority or credence to the Unsullied and the Dothraki, even though they're criminals. But anyways, Edmure. Oh, hey, in case you forgot about that character, because they almost ran out of characters to carry on the rest of the 50 minutes of the show, Edmure gets up and decides to make an impassioned speech as to why he should be king, only to talk for a minute and then end up as a joke when Sansa cuts him off and just says, "Sit down, dumbass. You're not going to be on the throne."
Which is probably the best part of the episode.
No, well, that was good. The best part is Ghost.
No. Fuck Ghost.
The fact that it proved that D&D had a concept that the audience could view something, remember that thing, and then, like, reference that later on was probably the most impressive thing they've done all season.
No, it's not, because they didn't even spend their budget to do it. They just used an old scene from, season 5 of Ghost being pet? They forgot all about it. They just put it in there last minute.
There's rumors going around that that's just the same scene that was taken when Jon got back and saw Ghost for the first time after his excursion in the north. It's just rehashed and then altered backgrounds.
That's amazing.
That's what I've heard due to backlash in Jon not petting Ghost in the 4th episode. So it might not even have been them. We don't know yet.
If that's true, whoever was able to make that happen, that's pretty impressive, though, so well done.
I think that was the worst part of the episode.
Even the best part of the episode of him just petting Ghost and having it finally be over, it might not be
that was nice.
The original idea.
Was this the only episode that D&D directed?
In the series?
Yeah.
Good question.
I'm not sure.
I think they may have. I would imagine they've had this done.
It was horribly directed.
It would be ironic if it was, and it's also the lowest rated episode of the series.
I would believe that.
They did, or at least David Benioff did The Iron Throne, Two Swords, and Walk of Punishment. 2 Swords was a very good episode. That was the
season 4 opener.
Right, and then Walk of Punishment was
Cersei's.
Yeah, it sounds like season 5.
No, season 3, episode 3.
What?
Rob and Catelyn arrive at River Run. Tywin names Tyrion the new master of coin. Arya says goodbye to Hot Pie, and the Night's Watch goes to Craster's. And that's when Brienne and Jaime are taken prisoner.
Oh, well, that season 3 was good.
Season 3 might be one of the best.
Probably the best at this point. That or season 4. It's a toss-up.
Season 2, that was by far my favorite season.
Was it really?
Yeah, with getting to see like how Tyrion inherits the city, and then his arc of like leading up to that battle. That was so good.
If you are pro Tyrion, that is one of his better scenes and one of his better arcs, which for some reason never came back into play in these seasons. Like, you think it would. You thought that he won over the public of King's Landing, but that never. I mean, it goes into season 4 when he's like, it pays off there, but it never really culminates further, which I always thought that it would.
And then also season 2, like Arya's story, like with all of Arya's family members dying, that's pretty tragic, but just with Arya being in that camp, that was probably like the most traumatic thing. But it also introduced her, like, she had a nice arc where she actually got that guy to kill people for her. That was a really good arc.
That, and she was with Tywin. That's probably my favorite part of that.
Oh, those conversations, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which was
that
actually
wasn't even in the books.
Yeah, she's supposed to be with Roose Bolton, but I thought it was much better that she was with Tywin, because he's a more
for the show,
yeah, especially for the show's purpose, because the Boltons really weren't doing anything yet, or they weren't really players in the game. And for her to kind of interact with Tywin like that was like, ooh, this is some good shit. Well, and that's the thing. Like they start Arya's story off with her playing all these different characters. It's all foreshadowing to she's gonna wear all these different faces, and she's gonna become all these different people. And then they forget any of that ever happened. Arya doesn't do anything with her assassination other than she stabs the Night King and like a ninja out of nowhere.
Ooh, here's a good complaint I have, is that based on Arya's storyline, she should have become Master of Whispers. And if George R.R. Martin isn't planning that, that might be one of my very few complaints against George R.R. Martin's story. I don't think she should be going west of Westeros. She should be Master of Whispers, using her talents that she gained like the entire series.
My only critique of that is it's like, does Bran need a Master of Whispers if he's omniscient?
I don't know what Bran is, though.
Right.
Bran's the biggest dickhead of all time. That's what he is.
Let's talk Bran.
Bran straight up says...
So does Bran.
Yeah, he straight up...
Saying the word Bran sounds like a joke. I don't know why.
He thought it was a joke when he got the script. He looked at it and he was like, oh, I thought this was a joke. I'm king? But, so Bran basically tells everybody, yeah, I was meant to be king all along. I knew this was going to happen. Which means that Bran knew everything that he was saying and doing was going to lead to this. So he just let Theon die in front of him, and he's like, well, this is going to help me become king. He let all of King's Landing get burnt down because he manipulated everyone's character around Dany to allow her to go crazy. He didn't just say, hey, you know, they're going to do some shit. Don't go do this. He just lets it happen. He even says to Jon, you know, it's up to you if you want to tell your sisters. You know, knowing that him telling his sisters is going to lead to Dany freaking the fuck out and going nuts and killing everybody. So Bran's just a big fucking douchebag.
No, and the best part is the theory that Bran warged into Drogon in order to save Jon after he killed Dany. But he didn't use Drogon to kill Dany or to stop killing the city. He just used warging into Drogon to save his brother.
But you know, like that would involve what is it? Him using his powers in this season, and you know they kind of forgot that he could do any of that, because you know none of that fucking happens whatsoever in this entire goddamn season. Bran doesn't do shit except at the end say, "Yeah, I planned everything. I was meant to be king all along, even though I told you straight up, yeah, I don't want anything. I'm the three-eyed raven now, but bitch, I want to be king. Hell yeah." Fucking stupid.
I gotta go, guys.
Alright.
Hey, yo.
Alright, see, keep on talking, though.
Peace.
Bye, guys. Good podcasting with you.
Yeah, this is our magnum opus.
Favorite character of the series before you go?
In the books, Jaime. In the show,
Hot pie.
I don't know, Arya, I guess. Or Tyrion. I don't know. The show, I don't like the show.
Fuck the show. Basically what we're getting at.
Jaime, Tyrion, and Arya are my three favorite characters. Okay.
Peace.
Bye, guys.
Hot pie all day.
Anyways, yeah, so for those of you who have never read or seen the movie, although the comic book is significantly better, Watchmen, spoilers, basically the bad guy of Watchmen is in a secluded area, like a secluded science base on, I believe, somewhere in the Arctic. His name is Ozymandias. And the good guys, being Rorschach and Night Owl, are trying to take him down, and he turns around and, like a cliche villain, he's explaining his evil master plan to cause world destruction by having nuke and monsters go off and explode all major cities around the world during the height of the Cold War. And he does this because he believes if everyone suffers a massive tragedy at once and millions die, then it'll end the Cold War and everyone will have to find peaceful resolutions between nations in order to rebuild. And when they get there and he's explaining this, he goes, but I already did that 30 minutes ago, you're late. And so the good guys have completely failed and the bad guy has pulled off his plan and there's nothing for them to do but try to kick his ass because they're furious. Well, I don't know if it was intentional for the writers, but they really did just take the Ozymandias plan and give it to Bran and say that his whole arc, he purposely let almost every major character, all the civilians, pretty much all major atrocities committed by Dany and the Unsullied, Bran's the person to blame. And when they offer the throne to him, unlike a couple episodes ago when they said, hey, don't you want to be you're the last male heir to Winterfell. Do you want Winterfell? He goes, I'm not Bran anymore. I'm the three-eyed raven. Yet in this episode, they're like, hey, Bran, do you want the throne? He goes, why the fuck do you think I came here, bitches? Give me that throne. So,
Yeah.
Bran's the villain.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of is. But let's talk about them just giving Bran the throne, because their reasoning behind it is he has the best story.
Oh.
That's literally the reason why everybody votes for him. So Dorne, who's been fighting for power for years and years, and this entire show trying to get power on the throne, they're okay with it. Then you have the Iron Islands, all the Greyjoys. They don't give a fuck about any signs of weakness. They don't care about... Actually, they were probably okay with Dany burning the shit out of all of King's Landing. They probably would have seen her as a goddamn hero because they were teamed up with her. And
Yara does. She says something along the lines of, what about my queen? Jon killed the queen. I want Jon's head. She says something along that line.
Yeah.
You just want to punch her in the face because you're like, are you deluded? Did anyone just forget what just happened last episode?
Well, I don't think they would have cared. That's the thing. And their characters really shouldn't care that all the people in King's Landing died.
Ironborn, you're right, but you might be bringing more book influence in on that. In the show, I don't think there's much to believe that Yara wouldn't care. I don't think they painted the Ironborn out to be as ruthless in the show as they are in the books.
Regardless, she's okay with Bran. Even after, yeah, you're saying like she's mad because Jon killed Daenerys, her queen. But she's like, Bran has a really cool story, so, he gets it. And then you have Robert Aaron, who has done absolutely nothing except be trained into how to be a proper non-annoying character. For whatever reason, he's okay with Bran, but I guess that one kind of makes somewhat sense because it's like, oh, it's family and I don't want to be king and I don't know these other people. So maybe he's the best choice for right now.
Why did Royce get a say if Aaron is there? Robin. Robin.
Yeah.
Aaron is there. Why did Lord Royce get a say? He's just a knight of Robin Aaron, yet he gets a say on the council on the council.
I guess unless he's speaking for Robert Aaron.
But they both get votes.
Yeah.
They both vote at the same time.
I don't fucking know. Anyways, so yeah, he votes for him too. And then, the rest of them kind of make sense why they would vote for him. Like the Tullys and... Who else was up there? There's somebody else. Oh, Sam was up there. Obviously, Sam makes sense.
But why does Sam even get a vote? Well, they made him of House Tarly, but I never thought that meant that he got a vote. He's still a noble, but he's not one of the owners of the kingdom.
Well, he's the only one who would be Wouldn't he be the only surviving heir for the kingdom?
Parley House served Highgarden, I thought.
Oh,
And that would mean Bronn should be sitting up there in place of Highgarden, because Highgarden was one of the kingdoms.
I don't fucking know.
Hey, just like this whole final portion of this episode, nothing makes any sense.
No.
But yes, stories are the number one criteria that we should pick kings, according to Tyrion. And Tyrion says Bran has the best story, which is just completely false. He has the worst story, and he even sat out an entire season, and the fans know that.
Yeah, all of season 5, he was just gone.
And I think that's such an injustice to Tyrion's character to have his final speech be such a garbage one, saying that Bran's story is what gives him the right to be king. But then anyways, they all vote for Bran to be king, and immediately, once they have him be king, Sansa goes, "Oh, by the way, can you make the North its own independent kingdom?" And Bran goes, "Yeah, I got you, sis." If you were anyone like Dorne or the Iron Islands, they'd be like, "What the fuck? Why can't we do that? We want to be independent as well."
Yeah, and those two specifically would take that if offered. Why aren't they trying to get that? Unless they're like deciding, hey, we could just murder this little crippled kid in his sleep.
And it's silly to think that if you pick a king and say that he can't have kids, and you have to constantly elect a king, if the king makes the rules, there's nothing to say that he could just change those rules and have a kid and be like, yeah, my kid's going to be king next. That's actually what happened in history, in real life. That has happened. Whenever they try to elect kings then they have official rule in a monarchy, and they could just end up changing the rules, and you can't go against the king. So they would just be like, yeah, well, I got elected this, but I'm just going to have a kid, and now they're going to be king.
Yeah.
Oh, let's not mention the best part. So, Grey Worm wants Jon executed, and now Bran's king, and he goes, well, we don't need to execute him, we'll just send Jon to the Watch.
Which doesn't exist. I
I
don't know if they were trying to like fool Grey Worm. Like, hey, you know the Watch doesn't exist anymore, but then they get to the Watch and there's still people there. And there's people set up there. It's like, why the fuck is the Watch still there?
The wall's rebuilt as well.
Yeah. Well, it could be a different section of the wall.
You're right, because I forget if they attacked East Watch or Castle Black.
Yeah.
But regardless, Jon goes up to the wall with the wildlings. And the wildlings... This is where Jon sees Ghost and Tormund. They go through the gate, because who the fuck is going to stop them? There's no Night's Watch. And they go north? Yet none of this makes any sense, because the wildlings were always exiles and outlaws who were trying to get back into the north because of how brutal being in the far north was. They wanted the fertile lands of what they considered to be the south to live on and to farm on, because they couldn't sustain life up in the brutal temperatures of the far north. So it makes no sense why they all just say, oh, let's just go back to this shithole, this super freezing place that we all hate. Let's just go back up
where
there
we
for
can't
no
grow
reason.
any food, where you're saying it's just cold as shit. I mean, we're allowed to stay north or south of the wall, but let's just go back north because that'll make us more free.
Right. And then, regardless, Sansa is an independent queen of the north, which means she doesn't even have to answer to Bran. So if she wants, she can pardon Jon as soon as he gets up there. Why would Grey Worm couldn't keep any tabs on any of this bullshit. Not only that, Bran as well. He's the king of all the 6 remaining kingdoms. He could pardon Jon if he wants to. Like, why the fuck would they listen to Grey Worm, a criminal? Let's talk about Grey Worm for a sec. This dumbass says he's going to go to Nath, all because of Missandei. But if I'm not mistaken, in the books,
Butterflies.
and I want to say in the show, there may have been a throwaway line, but you can't go to Nath because butterflies there carry a disease that will kill all outsiders. So as soon as those Unsullied get to Nath, they would all die from disease within a couple of days.
Yep.
So, goodbye, Grey Worm.
I was going to bring that up
Time.
because I didn't know if you knew about that or not.
Yep, I knew about that. The
So,
fact that they do that is insane and beyond stupid.
and the best part is, Bran would know all this. So he would know that he's planning on going to Noth and that they're all going to be dead in like 2-3 days, maybe a week. And yet he still allows Jon to get sent to the wall. Thus making Bran an even bigger dick than he already was.
He's got to make up for the fact that his dick doesn't work.
His dick don't work, so he becomes the biggest dick in the world.
Grey Worm, I can see your future. You're totally a dead motherfucker as soon as you step on that island. But fuck it, I'm not gonna tell you. Just like I'm gonna withhold important information from all other characters this season. That's my only character arc.
Yeah, Grey Worm's in for a rude awakening.
Can we talk about Arya for a second before we get to what's even worse? The small councils.
West Aria?
Well, Arya this season accomplished nothing but kill the Night King. So she killed the Night King, and that was the only thing she did this season. When she got on the horse in the ending of the Bells episode before this finale, the horse doesn't even come into play.
She's not on the horse in the next episode.
The horse is gone. The horse does not appear in this finale whatsoever. I guess she just rode out of the city and then walks right back in. Because the only time she appears in this episode is when, right before Jon goes to stab Dany, Arya comes out of nowhere and she goes, I've seen many killers. I know a killer when I've seen one. Referring to Dany. It's like, no shit, dumbass. She just killed like a couple thousand people. We can see that she's bad. Thanks for your input, Captain Obvious. And then the only other thing she does this episode, aside from threaten to kill Yara at when they're going to elect Bran as king, the only other thing she does is she goes, I'm going to go west of Westeros. I'm going to become a sailor now and explore. I guess what's west of Westeros is just Essos, but okay.
Yeah, wasn't she already there?
She was in Essos. She just wasn't on that side of Essos.
Oh.
Oh, see? So Arya, I mean, if she's your favorite character, I can believe you over the series, but if you liked her this season, I find that hard to believe. She does nothing but kill the Night King, who the Night King was completely useless. So,
well,
she accomplished.
She also gives this piece of dialogue that kind of frustrated me this episode. And as the episode was airing, I even went, what? So she says to Jon, I went to King's Landing and I was there to kill Cersei, but Dany got to her first. It's like, no, you decided not to kill Cersei last fucking minute. And you decided to go down and try to escape King's Landing when you were in the tower 10 feet away from Cersei. You made that conscious choice. But she forgot that she made that choice to escape and not kill Cersei and just let her go. And then this episode, she's like, oh, yeah, no, Dany got to her first. What?
That's a complete slap in the face to anyone who was defending her Arya killing the Night King, because Melisandre said to Arya, you'll kill people, or you'll shut many eyes. You'll shut brown eyes, green eyes, and blue eyes. Arya never killed anyone with green eyes, and Cersei was the person with green eyes, and she didn't kill her. So how does that prophecy make sense if she never even fulfilled it? Like, that was the whole writing reason that D&D said that Arya would kill the Night King, was because of that throwaway line from Melisandre. And she doesn't even fulfill it all the way. Meryn Trant had brown eyes, but the Night King had blue eyes. She never killed anyone with green eyes. So how is that a prophecy or any sort of foreshadowing if she doesn't even complete all of the foreshadowing?
We just kind of forgot that, we set up all these prophecies into place and had no way to fulfill them all.
Arya's
Yeah.
I can't.
There's the whole 2 seasons, which I already thought that was lazily put together with her becoming a faceless man and then getting chased by the Terminator. And then
Yeah.
right after all that happens, she kills all the Freys, and that's the only purpose of her becoming a faceless man
Yep.
is just to kill the Freys.
An entire season build up only to use her power, that the most
One time.
sought after power of having complete anonymity and being able to hide anywhere and just have a completely, you could change your image at any time, like the perfect tool for an assassin, and it's never used ever again
Or even mentioned.
or mentioned. True.
Because
She
they
doesn't
don't.
even tell her brothers or sister. She just goes, whatever.
She's just like, yeah, I'm a super ninja, but I'm not going to use it. Kind of like Bran is like, I can see everything in anyone and warg into anything and anyone, but I'm just not going to do it.
I kind of forgot that I had those powers.
Yeah,
Do we want to talk about the small council?
go for it.
Oh, God.
And are you
So
calling it the
after-
small council because that's what they call it? Or are you saying because it's Tyrion's council and he's short?
I'm not making no midget jokes.
I just did.
I know you did.
Did you get that picture I sent you of him holding the shield and it said Peter Dinklage used to sell guitar picks?
Oh my god. Anyways, they have a small council scene of which they spend about 2 minutes of Tyrion by himself walking around the small council room, which is apparently rebuilt now because we don't know how much time they've skipped so far. And he starts adjusting everyone's chairs for about a minute of just Tyrion adjusting chairs in a finale of the greatest television show ever.
And it's a good 2 minutes.
It's no joke. This is not an exaggeration. And so everyone comes in, and you've got Tyrion's now Hand of the King, so he's Hand of the King to Bran. Bronn is Master of Coin, which makes no sense. You have Davos as Master of Ships, which makes sense. Brienne is assumably King's Guard.
Yep.
And Samuel Tarly is the Grand Maester, which makes no sense because the Maester's tower was never destroyed, so they would automatically be like, yeah, he definitely can't be a Maester because he kind of just left us high and dry and
Stole a bunch of books.
stole a bunch of our restricted books. He shouldn't be Maester of anything. Along with that, Bronn shouldn't be Master of Coin because in season 1 when he met Tyrion, he didn't know what a debt was. He had Tyrion have to explain to him how debt works. Yet he's Master of Coin just so that he could come back into the show because he didn't follow through on his plot that was introduced in the first episode where he would kill Tyrion or Jaime. He just kind of did that and somehow got Highgarden. And why he got Highgarden makes no sense if Dany was the one who promised him Highgarden and Dany isn't in power. How the fuck is he the Lord of Highgarden? Can anyone explain this to me? It doesn't make any sense. Anyways,
Wait, did Dany offer him Highgarden or did Tyrion say, I'll give you
Tyrion
Highgarden?
offered it if Dany got King's Landing. And so that's what he took the offer on. But if Dany didn't even sit on the throne and wasn't even announced queen for a second of anything, why do her commands have any weight or value? And why would Highgarden, which is, although they lost a siege to the Lannisters, that doesn't mean that they just collapse and people forget it. It hasn't even been a year, I would assume, in the episode. Who knows? Time doesn't make sense in these later seasons. But, they basically turn Game of Thrones into a sitcom, and the small council is just cracking jokes and making fun of everyone else's position. They talk about rebuilding brothels, because Bronn's Master of Coin and he wants to fuck. So that becomes their main priority. Sam puts down a book. He said a maester wrote it, and he called it A Song of Ice and Fire, and it's detailing all the events that have happened since season 1. And he tells Tyrion that he's not in the book. which might be the most frustrating thing as a viewer to hear. And then Bran asks where Drogon is, and he says he wants to look for Drogon.
I'll give
I
speech
forgot
for
to mention that Brienne went into the Book of Knights that Joffrey was reading way back in the earlier seasons. That details like
all
Sir
the
Duncan
knights.
Hall and Jamie had a very short story because at that time he was still Kingsguard, and the only thing he had really done was kill the Mad King. So Brienne starts finishing out his story, which is a nice touch. But she writes that he died defending his queen, which is an extremely infuriating line and just puts the nail in the coffin to Jaime's character arc. One of the greatest television characters of all time. And his whole arc is just ruined and pissed on.
Well, some people could argue, though, and I would kind of argue that that was just a way of Brienne trying to put it down in history that he was a noble person and he did the right thing. So that way when people look back on generations, so that part of it, that's all fine. But you're forgetting that that's not the way she ended it, because after that she said, P.S. he also fisted me.
Yeah, she did write that. I forgot to mention that little detail.
When your brother sent me that picture, I was already kind of like disappointed with everything that just happened in this episode. And then he sent me that picture where it says at the bottom, fisted me. And it made this entire episode okay.
The only thing good to come out of this finale are the memes. They have been top quality memes.
I really like that Oblivion one you sent.
I can't even remember. I've sent so many.
Well, it's like doing the conversation when you're trying to charm the guard or person or whatever.
Oh, no, that was my brother.
So they're like the super frown because it's the bad option, and then the exaggerated smile because it's the good option. I love that one. That was good.
Yes. But even then, it doesn't make any sense why Brienne would say that. I don't think I've ever really known personally a girl who's had a one-night stand and was really attached to a person and was perfectly okay with them just hitting it and quitting it and leaving. It just doesn't seem like something in Brienne's character. Her first love drunkenly hits it and quits it, and she's still perfectly okay with that.
Maybe Brienne is just a lot more mature than you, and she's okay with this because honor first.
Because Jaime fit his whole arm in there.
His old golden hand.
He gave her the golden touch. What can we say? That's how Brienne's story ends. I guess out of characters who had good arcs this season, of the ones that are alive, Brienne had the best arc, and maybe Sansa. Although Sansa loses some cred because she immediately tattletaled on Jon and told Tyrion of his lineage. So she kind of loses some major points there. That is actually the point where you could say that Dany snapped was because Sansa let the secret out, which Jon did. Arya kept it secret, and Sansa's the one who decided to blurt it out and ruin it for everyone. And then, yeah, I mean, we already talked about Jon going to the wall, the north of the wall, so that pretty much covers the episode. We didn't go too far into Tyrion's speech with Jon, but it's so unnecessary, in my opinion, because it's just, do you really need to explain to Jon how to be good? One of the most good characters throughout the entire show needs to learn what it's like to be good. He needs to realize that mass murder is not okay.
It's not?
But my queen. My queen.
You are my queen now and always.
I don't want it.
I
don't want the throne. I don't want the titles.
This is what Dany should have said when she got stabbed by Jon.
You're making a goddamn mess, Reese.
Yeah, you know my pussy dangerous.
You know her pussy be dangerous.
Yeah, you know my pussy dangerous. That's what she should have said as she was dying.
Do you want to address people who are going around saying that people like us don't like the finale because it didn't go our way for our favorite characters.
Well, I think I tried to address that right away. I think from what we've said, we've kind of. I mean, it did probably come across as we're just complaining about little events that happen. But I tried to put it off in the beginning and set the record straight that the reason why, and I think I'm speaking for all of us, we didn't like this is not because the story, it's the writing made no goddamn sense. And events like this and like details get dropped and don't matter, and everything with Arya for 2 seasons doesn't matter. Everything with all these other characters just don't matter. And it's just they tried to wrap it up in a very clumsy way. And some people can overlook that clumsiness, and I couldn't. I don't want to forgive a show that spends all this time setting things up and then doesn't pay off any of them. They even set up things this season and decided not to pay them off. And it's just annoying as a viewer that everything's got to get subverted and go against everyone's expectations just for the sake of doing it. Like, there didn't seem like any narrative reason to do half the things they did other than it would look cool. Like Drogon burning down the throne and nobody sits on it. And that's coming from me, who was saying, I don't give a shit about the throne. I didn't think the show was about the throne. And then they make it about the throne, and then the throne just gets burnt down for cinematic reasons.
Right, and people are saying,
dumb shit
well,
like
it's
that.
called Game of Thrones for a reason, although that is such an eye-rolling thing to say.
Yeah. To make
The
this
show
entire
actually-
show about just nothing but the throne is a lazy cop-out to me.
When the whole series was setting up that the throne, titles, labels, all of it is feudal. Everyone's like personal quests for... In the grand scheme of things, the world does not care about your problems. So characters who are actively driven by vengeance motives, they almost never achieve vengeance. Robb Stark's whole character arc ends with him just completely failing and dying. And to argue that people didn't like it because it didn't go their way for characters, some of Game of Thrones, if not Game of Thrones' best moments, are when major characters died in reasonable, realistic ways, and there was very little repercussions to the people who did it to them. That is what made the Red Wedding. You lose Robb, Catelyn, and I forget if it's Tulsa or Taisha. I know it's a different name in the books. It's Jane Poole, but in the show, Robb's with his wife is the different lady, or goes by a different name. But all those major characters die then and there. And Robb at that point was one of my favorite characters. I was shocked, and rightfully so, because if you go back, you realize how much the Red Wedding was set up. And losing Robb, I was like, holy shit. I was shocked, but I wasn't upset, because I was like, it makes sense. They killed him in a reason that made sense. This season doesn't do any of that. Introducing that Lyanna and Rhaegar are Jon's parents never pays off in any way, shape, or form, and is never brought up in the moment when it should be brought up most. And that's when they're talking about heir to the throne. If the whole series is about the idea of who sits on the Iron Throne, then Jon, it has to be your clear answer. If the whole show is about the Iron Throne, then the rightful heir of the throne, of the kingdoms, is Jon. And I don't think you can argue that if that's your point, or if someone makes that point. You would have to then support Jon. And in that moment, Sansa and Arya and Sam and Tyrion should have all said something about that. But they didn't. They decided to give the kingdom to Bran because subversion.
You know, and I'm fine with Jon not sitting on the throne, and
Same.
I'm honestly fine with it being Bran if they set it up in a different way and didn't make the reasoning, oh, he's just got a great story. Like, you can make anything work and anything seem cool. But, yeah, that's the thing with Jon becoming a Targaryen and them putting all that emphasis on Lyanna and
Rhaegar.
Rhaegar. Oh yeah, R plus L equals J. With all that, just to make it a reason why Dany goes crazy, like that's the whole purpose of finding out he's a Targaryen after all that we've been through on this show, like him being a bastard and being scorned and being treated differently just because he was a bastard's child and all this shit, just to, you know, have it kind of be a throwaway. And that's the reason why Dany went over the top.
Yeah, it's a very flimsy, partial reason to make a woman commit mass murder when it goes against her complete character that they've set up the entire season or the entire series.
Yeah, it's just so convoluted. Just you didn't need it, and this show would have been exactly the same.
Right, and that also, to justify us further, when you realize that the Night King served no story purpose and no narrative purpose, you really start to wonder how much time you wasted watching this show. Like, every White Walker scene amounts to nothing and creates nothing because it was all squandered in the end and has no impact on any of the characters this season. Virtually none. It's so frustrating. You just realize that when they have all these arcs and they all just go nowhere, it impacts the rest of the series. And you could go back and be like, well, this scene leads to nothing. This doesn't have a payoff. This is a waste of time here. It just really brings down the whole series. And on IMDb, not that it matters in the grand scheme of things, but it dropped from a 9.5 to a 9.4 recently.
Yep.
For the series as a whole, just to the impact of these past 6 episodes, which is a real shame.
And I want to go back and talk about the people who say that, well, the show's called Game of Thrones. It's not called Game of Ice King.
No.
So let's go back to season 1, episode 1, the very first minute of the show. Because in storytelling, there's a thing called the inciting incident. And the purpose of the inciting incident is to get the story going. And this usually happens in movies within the first 10 minutes. It could be anything from a character has to do a big quest, so the quest is introduced to them. Or the movie that popped into my head, This Is the End, with Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill and Jay Baruchel and all them when they're in the house during the apocalypse. The inciting incident of that movie is there's a giant earthquake and people start dying. There's like a big moment when they go to the house party, and then actually the inciting incident would be actually them going to the house party probably. So they get an invitation, hey, let's go to this party. And that's what gets the story going. The inciting incident of this show happens in the very first couple minutes, where, you know, there's some undead people in the forest and whatnot, and they're chasing down all these Night Riders, or Brothers of the Watch.
It's 3 Brothers of the Night's Watch, and they're looking for wildlings, and one of them stumbles upon the symbol of dismembered wildlings.
Yep.
And then they run into a White Walker. They come back and all the dismembered body parts are gone, and then they run into a White Walker for the first time.
Yeah.
They actually run into multiple White Walkers, and all the characters that they just introduced are all killed.
Yeah, and this is what starts off the entire series, is this looming, ominous, strange threat. And when you first watch the show, you don't really understand what's really going on because the zombies aren't ever really mentioned again until, you know, like John has to kill one of them to save Mormont.
George.
Yeah. So the story gets started off, there's this zombie threat. And it's very mysterious and we know nothing about it. And we just kind of get these little snippets like that. But my point is, it's what starts off the entire series, which means this is what the series is going to ultimately be about, is these zombies and whatever they are and whatever their purpose is. And over the next couple seasons, it keeps getting built up more and more and more. And then we get to Hard Home, and it hits its magnum opus, where this is like, oh my god, this is the biggest threat imaginable. Like, look at the destructive power that they have. And then we get the next couple seasons where this is what John's whole purpose is letting people know that this threat is coming and this threat's going to arrive and we're going to have to fight it. And then, yeah, we get an hour and 20-minute long episode, and then it all gets wrapped up with a nice little bow. And then we get told, yep, it wasn't about that at all. And, yep, none of that had any purpose. If that never happened, the rest of the show could have still carried on.
Yep.
And that is extremely frustrating.
And I think what's most frustrating about it is having Drogon destroy the throne regardless. So, couldn't that have been achieved by having the White Walkers take over Westeros? They could have gotten rid of the entire system themselves. John's trying to warn and convince everyone to put aside their differences and stop warring in the most troubled times in the history of Westeros. Everyone's fighting. John's trying to convince people to stop because they have to band together and face the real threat. Yet the real threat doesn't end up doing anything, and nothing about the threat is explained because it seems like it was too much work to write in any lore or anything that would make sense for the White Walkers. So they just got rid of them. And that confuses me because when people say I didn't get what I want, I didn't. I wanted the White Walkers to destroy everything and make it so that everything was for naught. It would just be perfect to show the futility of having this endless war between people, and they don't put aside their differences, and Mother Nature just takes over and puts an end to it itself. But they decided to go the route of reestablishing politics or trying to end up in the same system, which is a weird way to get to a happy ending for a show that should never have a happy ending, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I thought they were setting it up. It's not that it couldn't have a happy ending or that characters aren't allowed to have happy endings, but there's very little consequence to the remaining characters who survive, and it just seems like it'll repeat itself in the way that they set up their new political system.
Yeah, people are making it sound like, oh, the show had a bittersweet ending and it didn't end on an up point, so that's why people are mad. It's like,
It ended pretty good for everyone who wasn't a citizen in King's Landing.
It even ended good for John, who got sent back to the wall and gets to just hang out with his best friend and his dire wolf.
Everyone got pretty much what they wanted, and no major characters died this season outside of Dany and Cersei and Jaime. That was really it.
Yeah, all the Starks were okay. Every single one of the Stark children was okay because Rickon doesn't exist. He doesn't matter. But all the Starks are okay.
Oh yeah, they never even like, oh yeah, Rickon's dead. Who cares?
Yeah, they just completely forgot that Rickon ever existed.
Which is a shame.
But we're coming up to like an hour and 20-something minutes, so...
Let's do favorite characters in the series and close it out.
I would go with Micah, the butcher's boy, Hot Pie, and Old Nan.
Good choices. I really like your Micah, the butcher's boy.
He was a very influential character, I think.
He really was. I mean, he's what kicked off all of Arya's arc, so he is a pretty important character.
I do like that she eventually forgot his name.
The fat boy just bled on my horse. The butcher's boy. I would say, for me, for my number one position of favorite characters, it's a toss-up between Stannis Baratheon and my boy Reek, Theon Greyjoy.
But Stannis,
Nicholas.
hundreds will die. Thousands.
Thousands. Oh man, my boy Stannis. He really burned his daughter for nothing, and I
Yeah,
love
he
him
did.
for it. Talk about a character who really wanted the throne more than anyone.
Yeah. So imagine if they did that. Stannis never died, and he's sitting on that council, and he's like, Bran did have a really great story.
Oh my god.
Imagine if that happened.
That would be the greatest character assassination of all time. Stannis bending the knee to a cripple.
And then
Oh.
and then Stannis says, let's all give each other a hug and hold hands and sing hymns.
Also want to give shout outs to Tywin, because Tywin also had a great character. Pretty much anyone who was just in season 1 and up to season 4 is great. So shout outs to Bobby B, my boy Bobby Baratheon, and Ned Stark. Thanks for trying to keep a secret for your entire life, only to have it ruined by your fucking kids. Piece of shit.
And that was our review of the last season of Game of Thrones. Aaron rage quit, and it's just down to Jake and I, so we will bid y'all adieu.
Peace. Don't commit mass murder.
That means goodbye in German. Goodbye, y'all.